Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. And today I'm joined by Amy Louise Carton, who's the co-founder and CEO of KeepAppy, the international award-winning wellness app. So I will leave no more of the introductions as we're slightly behind and Amy has so much to talk about. So Amy, I will leave that to you. And if anyone has any questions, please use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen and we'll be sure to pick them up and question Amy about anything you have. Okay, Amy.
Great, and thank you for that introduction. It's going to be a fun talk, and please ask away because it's so important that we open this conversation and people feel comfortable asking questions, because I know sometimes it can be some of the topics might be a little bit unusual or unexpected. So I'm going to share my screen now and hopefully you can all see it. And I'm going to click present. So today we're going to be talking specifically about stress management, how to conquer it, how to tackle it. And we're going to take a really practical approach. So we're going to introduce it. We're going to introduce you to different mechanisms for managing stress. And then, of course, because it's lockdown and everyone's sleep is a bit funny, we're going to talk about sleep before the Q&A. So I like to begin every presentation with a story, my story. A few years ago, I got really beat down by stress and anxiety. I didn't know at the time I was struggling with PTSD, but I had all the hallmarks of it and I just wasn't aware. Because for so many of us, we are taught to just ignore our emotions and our feelings and just suppress them, just move on, just keep going, keep pushing ourselves instead of actually managing them or tackling them or even understanding them. And that's what I did. And it brought me to an incredibly dark point in my life where I couldn't see a way out of that anxiety and that trauma. And it brought me up to such a dark point that I made an attempt on my life. I did attempt suicide. And sharing this story with you all today, it's not to give you this is your worst nightmare, this is your potential outcome of stress. It's not. But I do want to highlight that not managing stress can be very dangerous because it can lead to this overwhelming sense of loss. But there are ways to manage it. And this is what I've built my company around, because in the months after my attempt, I realized that mental health is very similar to physical health and that we can manage it and proactively look after it and build up our mental fitness and build a six-pack equivalent for our mental health. And to do all these things, I realized that we needed to take a proactive attempt. And that's where I built my company, KeepAppy. We reached 130 countries and are empowering people all over the world. So it's really exciting that I get to be here today to talk to all of you, because I know, being the ambitious individuals you are, being the driven people who've succeeded and accomplished so much, you accept stress. Stress is part of our lives, but it's about managing it, understanding it, and taking control of it, that we can be our best selves. So let's talk about it. I always like to talk about mental health. It's important that we actually dive in and understand why this matters. So I'm sure some of you may know the statistics that 1 in 4 of us will struggle with a mental illness at one point in our life, with stress, anxiety, and depression being the 3 most common factors in the Irish ecosystem. By 2030, mental illness, specifically depression, will be the leading cause of worker unwellness and individual unwellness and chronic illness in the world. And unfortunately, 1 million people do die by suicide each year, and 19 million more make an attempt. So this is a really important topic that we're talking about today, because if you let something like stress go unmonitored, unmanaged, it can lead to mental illnesses. So let's talk about mental health versus mental illness, because these are 2 very important distinctions that we need to mention. Mental illness is known as the mental disorders. So I have PTSD and borderline personality disorder. You can have a variety of disorders, from anxiety-based ones to personality or emotional mood ones like depression. But there's also this spectrum called mental health that we don't talk about enough, from the highs to the lows, from stress before a deadline and your kids just being all over the place to, that amazing rush after a run or a swim or exercise. So it's really trying to understand this spectrum and to understand how we can optimize it. And that's why it's important to compare it to physical health, because So much of us engage with our physical health every day without even realizing how much we're doing. So I'm going to bring up a poll now to understand how many people actually monitor your physical health with tracking, whether you're wearing a wearable technology like me, or you track your weight. 54% of the population track their weight. Oh, I can't vote. So I hope everyone is voting and clicking away. And hopefully I'll get that in real time. I don't know if I can see it in real time. Oh, okay, now I can see it, sorry. Okay, so most people, so we have over, almost 75% of people saying that they would vote regularly, or sorry, do it regularly or sometimes. And that's really important. That's completely in line with the statistics out there. Oh, I'm just gonna exit out of that. Technology failing me. People know how to reduce the things that are considered negative. So I'll just share those results so people can see them and see how many of us interact with our physical health. We know to reduce the things that are considered negative for our well-being, and we know to prevent physical decline through regular exercise, nutritious food, and sleep. So what happens if we don't understand our mental health? It's similar to our physical health. If we don't know our weight or our physical well-being, we can't manage it. And if we don't understand that we're stressed, we don't know how to tackle it head on. And if we don't know what's going on, sometimes we can slip into such a consistent level of low mood and stress that we can end up in burnout. So if we talk about this, oh, Dee's, come on, Heidi. So when we compare this to physical health, it's important that we keep comparing that spectrum. So what happens when it comes to managing the mood and thoughts that exist? Because it's very tied to our stress, mood is. The roots behind mood and typically stress as well are I am unlovable, I am worthless, or I am a failure. You can track back all your anxiety, whether it's a conversation you had, a deadline you have, or anything, to these three core thoughts. And this is actually part of the cognitive behavioral theory of therapy. And it's really important that we understand that these are the roots, because then we can challenge them. You need to take two really important steps to understand, is this true? And does this absolutely matter? When you're starting to go through a spiral of stress or anxiety, you need to challenge these three thoughts and really understand that all of you have come so far. You are chartered accountants. You could never be a failure. You have done so much with your lives. The concept of being unlovable, it isn't true. None of us are unlovable. All of us have the potential to be loved, and most of us are loved by one person or by many. So questioning if this is objectively true and does this absolutely matter are the two most important mental steps you can take when feeling overwhelmed in a given point. So now it's important that we recognize what stress looks like. So stress is actually an amazing thing. It can lead to innovation and change. It can transform our work and productivity levels. And, it can be a really good thing. It's important that we experience stress, that we feel that flight or fright response to react and to solve a problem and to work. But it can also be terrible, as everyone everyone here, I'm sure, has experienced it. It can be overwhelming and it can be detrimental to our well-being. So when we look at stress, people really only see the top of the iceberg. 1/10 of the iceberg is the typical description, but they don't really see what's going underneath. And what stress can feel like is extremely physical. It's extremely cognitive, and it can also impact us behaviorally. So this experience of such a physical stressor, whether it's chest pain and dizziness, or this irritability and snapping back at different people when you don't mean to, you're not angry at your friend or your child, but you snap at them out of frustration and just exhaustion from this stress. So when we compare it to our physical health, it's kind of confusing, because we know what wellness looks like in physical health. We know what it looks like to run. We know what it looks like to be injured, say you twist your ankle. You know what recovery looks like when you go to the doctors or you go to a physiotherapist, and you know what it looks like to be healthy again. But when we compare this to stress, it's kind of hard to know what our standard starting point is, because we just know that we're happy or not. We then don't really know what it means to be too stressed. We don't know what recovery looks like. And then how do you know when you're happy again? Sorry, just clicking through. So what happens with stress then? We don't know when it's too unbalanced. We don't know how to manage the bad stress. And then we believe that we are exceptional. And it's really in professions like chartered accountants that you believe you are exceptional. You believe you are the exclusion to the rule, where you can fight and manage stress and you can deal with overwhelming amounts of stress. But the truth is, we're all human. Stress affects many of us, and it does affect accountants too. So how do you manage stress when you're feeling overwhelmed? This is a poll that should be coming up for you all. Do you ignore it? Do you exercise? Do you talk to a family friend or a professional, so like a therapist? Do you write it out with journaling or goal setting or different types of, positive psychology mechanisms? Do you meditate? Oh, I love watching this in real time. This is really exciting. Okay, so the clear winners are exercise, talking about it, and ignoring it, which is incredibly common. So talking about it to a friend, family, or professional. Oh, exercise won. Okay, that's fun. So talking about it is really important. And exercise is obviously a great mechanism, but it isn't actually tackling the issue of stress. It's just a coping mechanism. And that's an important distinction that I'll bring up later. However, it's still a really effective coping mechanism, and it's a healthy one. So that's amazing. Ignoring it obviously comes in number third. 26% of you are ignoring this stress, and that's detrimental to your well-being. You're the 1/4 of people who will struggle with this, and without managing it or facing it head on, you can really damage your well-being. So let's talk about this. What happens when you do ignore it? I'll share results so you can all see this. I'll just exit here. The iceberg starts to get chipped away. It starts to lose its buoyancy, it starts to crack, and then of course it topples. And that's what mental illness can be. That's what can happen with burnout. So let's actually go through the process of being stressed, because I'm sure we've all done this, but it's kind of interesting to explore it with the understanding of cognitive distortions. So this is one of the most common instances of stress exploding. So it's literally this case study where, here we go, you have a deadline, you start to panic, you don't know if you're going to get it done on time, or you don't know how to solve the deadline, you don't know how to produce the piece of work that's required of you. The time is counting down, you ask people, but you're kind of nervous to ask people, and then suddenly you're at night and you're exploding, and suddenly it's kaboom. Your mind is exploding with stress, it's all over, it's infiltrating all the different areas of your life, your behaviors change, you feel unwell, and stress is just leaking and expunging out of you. What about mind reading? So this is a big one in relationships, where you have a conversation and you say something negative, or the other person says something negative that's interpreted wrongly or rightly, it doesn't really matter, but you start to feel hurt. This question of I am unlovable comes into play again, and you start free falling. You think about it at night, you're upset, you're worried that this will impact your future, you can't see a way out, and then kaboom again. So this is called cognitive distortion. It's where your thinking is fatalist, or quite concerningly, just so almost whirlwindish, where you can't break out of these thoughts. So instead of letting that completely take over, and by asking those two questions I brought up before, by is this objectively true and does this matter to me now, it's also important that we be proactive. We don't just ignore it. We take it and tackle it head on, just like you would with the sprained ankle. You wouldn't keep walking around on a sprained ankle. You would ice it, or you would massage it, or you would do something to try strengthen that ankle. So next poll, this is the second last one, don't worry. How do you manage stress when feeling overwhelmed? Is this the right one? Oh, sorry. Is it coming through? Or is this the one that was before? Oh, how often do you process your worries? Sorry, I must have written the wrong thing. How often do you process your worries? So I know some of you said you don't, or you only do it sometimes. Okay, sometimes is winning. That's fantastic. I don't know how to is coming up. That's quite common. Most people never get taught this. We learn our biology in school, we learn physical health in school, but at no point were most of us really taught how to process our feelings. So that's coming in at 36%, and 51% of people are saying sometimes, which is quite common if talking to loved ones came up as the second most popular. So yeah, okay, so I'm just going to exit out of this. So this is where we bring in the question, is this objectively true? Does this absolutely matter to me right now? And now the third one is time to dig deeper, time to process those emotions and understand them. So I'll just share results so you can all see. So let's dig deeper. So let's pause it. When you're digging deeper and trying to understand, it's kind of like going to a physiotherapist, but for your brain. So you need to be in a safe environment. That's simply like not being in a coffee shop or feeling exposed or vulnerable, practicing mindfulness as opposed to meditation. So just being present, being honest with yourself, and finally being comfortable. If you're exploring the thoughts of your mind, you don't want to be sitting on like a church bench or something. So you need to start rationalizing. This is one of the most important mechanisms that we teach as part of mental health engagement. It's trying to rationalize any thoughts that might be distorted or kind of exposed to not necessarily truthful thinking. So what I mean by that is, because it's kind of a weird one to explain, but all of our minds exist in a vacuum. Our thoughts exist in a vacuum. So we are reinforcing all the thoughts that we have, even though they might not objectively be true. So for example, what stressed me out? A deadline is happening in work and your boss was passive aggressive to you at the end of the day. So what happened in the moments before? Maybe you drank a lot of coffee or sugar, or you were just out of sorts, and you're already out of sorts because you're stressed. It happened at the end of the day. So when did it happen? And that's kind of a typical time that you're stressed. And finally, what happened after? You called your friend, you're in terrible form, and you bickered at everyone around you. So is that actually what happened when you go through it? What stressed you out? What did you objectively know to be true? What objectively happened? And what are the factors that you know to be true? Maybe you were overreacting. Maybe his passive aggression is from a deeper problem in his own life. What happened before? Were you honest with yourself and your behavior? Was that the right way to behave? Maybe you had drank too much coffee. Are there any repeat factors to your stress? Is this something that's ongoing that you need to tackle? And were there any moments in the lead up to this action that made you more stressed than normal? When did it happen? What time of day are you most stressed? Do any of you know? Do any of you track that? Or do you kind of roughly know I'm most stressed in the evening because I just want to finish work? Or do you look at external factors? And then finally, where was I at the, or second last one, where was I at the time? Does this specific location put you on edge, or how do you feel in that environment? Do you want to be spoken to in that environment? After it, what happens? How did you react? How can you do anything to avoid it or to feel better? Can you go for a walk at the end of the day to close that off a situation, to react and let it burn out? So maybe that infiltrated your family and you want in your family life or home life, and you want to put pause and end stress where it happens. And this can be a really good way to rationalize a negative conversation, a fight, or anything, to really rationalize and understand what happened and see if you can counteract it, and consider it in a new light. So what happens when you're stressed about a future event? You can apply the exact same kind of consideration, but project it into the future. Objectively, what is the worst that can happen? Objectively, are there any positives that will arise? And how will this make me feel? Will it happen in 3 hours if this happens? So say I have a fight with my boss at the end of the day. What will happen in 3 hours? Probably still be pissed off. I would be kind of frustrated that he'd speak to me in that way. But at the end of 3 days, no one will remember that fight. Maybe in 3 weeks we'll fight again, but that's the worst that can happen. Maybe positives, we'll have an improved communication after it. What will happen in 3 months? Maybe things will change and I'll feel better after the positive communication by tackling it head on. Taking this kind of structured approach is really important for understanding how we internalize things, how we respond to stress, how we build upon it, how we learn from it. It's really important that we take this structured approach. So this brings me to the tools and techniques side. So obviously building up that response is incredibly important. Structuring it, rationalizing it, looking at it objectively is really important. But how can you do that? How can you do that every day or find some way to release stress? So this brings me to journaling. Journaling is something I have done religiously all my life. And I didn't really consider it as a proactive technique for mental health because journaling is something you do as a teenager, but actually the benefits of journaling have been proven time and time again, where people who journal are proven to have better sleep, so they have faster recovery times. They're known to be less stressed. They are considered to be repeatedly more productive and creative in the workplace because they're able to express their emotions. However, it is really important that I draw a distinction with this, that people who succeed at journaling are people who are descriptive. So they're people who like using flowery words, who like writing, who are, biologically driven towards this kind of habit. So it's important that people know that, because non-descriptive people, so people who typically like writing lists or having goals, journaling doesn't actually work as effectively for them. So we'll come to that kind of portion of the population next. But first, we're going to talk about journaling. So when we're stressed, our mind is typically in knots. That fatalist thinking can come in. We often get attacked by a variety of thoughts where we feel everything in life can be quite toxic or negative, and it's just all boiled up in our brains. And this is actually typically when running or exercise can be incredibly beneficial, because endorphins that are created through running and exercise can actually alleviate that knot, that kind of crushing of the mind, and can enable you to kind of just think things through. But sometimes running doesn't work, exercise doesn't work. So how can you get that knot and loosen it up and turn it into a thread? So this is where journaling comes in. And it's really important that you look at it from a very practical and objective way. So whether that's timing, doing it for a set amount of time each day at a specific time. Typically people recommend 4 pages at the start of the day, or just exploratory journaling at the end of the day. And having that consistent thing, trying it for 2 weeks and seeing how it affects you, can be really beneficial. Next, we come to expressive or targeted journaling. So this distinction is quite interesting, because expressive means just writing your thoughts, giving yourself that limit of 4 pages and just writing out your thoughts, exploring how you feel about different emotions, what you're looking forward to, what are your dreams, your hopes, excuse me. And then we come to targeted. So targeted is kind of like the rationalization strategy, but it's looking at different events. Say you are extremely stressed at the minute and you're trying to rationalize it, and you start building it down and you target in on something, an event, and you start exploring your emotions around the event. Say you're planning a wedding. I know we're not really because of lockdown, but what are you stressing about? Are you worried about people not showing? Are you worried about financial concerns? And you start targeting in and you look deeper. And this is the third component, because we always do need to look deeper, and we never actually do, because we're nervous, we're scared to look deeper, to kind of pull apart our mind to see what's going on under there. But it's important that you do, because it's by tackling and kind of facing into that knot that we can untangle it. So by having this targeted approach and really digging deep and always diving deeper and trying to look at the root of your concern, what is beneath this? So for the wedding example, why would you be concerned people aren't happy on the day? Why are you concerned on how you look and how you position yourself? And typically it comes to those 3 thoughts I originally mentioned. I am unlovable. People won't love me. People won't value me if my wedding isn't XYZ or isn't as presentable as I wanted it to be. Or maybe you're worried about work and you're realizing, if you go deeper, I don't want to do a bad job. I don't want to be seen as a failure to my parents. I don't want to be seen as a failure in front of my friends who are all wildly successful. That kind of thought process is completely based on this principle that there are these 3 thoughts that our mind comes to. So it's incredibly important to look deeper, to really press into what's going on, to try and understand it. And this is why journaling can be such an effective tool for that. So now we come to goal setting. So goal setting, as I mentioned, are for those people who typically like, writing lists, setting goals, striking off, doing all the things that make you have that endorphin rush. And goal setting is proven to be incredibly effective. I don't know if anyone here has read Atomic Habits. It is a really great book for setting yourself life goals and building up habits for day-to-day practices. But understanding that goal setting is understanding that goal setting is so important to our individual selves, because it roots our identity in our dreams, in our goals, in our ambitions. Even if it's wanting to move out of Dublin, what does that look like? Why is that goal there? How can you achieve it? And it can lead to a lot of stress. Like if we feel overwhelmed at work or that we're not hitting goals, it can feel really detrimental to our well-being. If we don't feel like we're on the right path in life, that can be extremely deteriorating to our well-being. So it's important that we do set goals and understand what setting goals looks like. So like I said, it can lead to quite whirlwind thoughts. So what that means is you're spiraling and thoughts are coming in and you're looking quite fatally at everything that hits your mind. And this is incredibly common for people who like having structure and coordination throughout their day. So it's important that we take this whirlwind and structure it out, whether it's with a to-do list or a goal setting track or building up habits that will manage this. So one of my favorite examples is Mount Everest. So it was, I don't know how people feel about him, but Elon Musk has built the Mount Everest of his life plan because he knew from such a young age what his goal was to do in life. He wanted to change the world. Obviously that's simplifying it, but he realized that to change the world, to achieve this massive mountain of a dream, he had to get to different levels, because you can't just envision the dream of, say, weight loss or, buying a house. You have to reach different camps to achieve that dream. People don't climb Mount Everest in a day. They don't do it on a single goal. They do it over time, building up different levels, achieving different camps. So this is what we do with a lot of people. We teach people how to set goals, where we look at setting goals and having your life's ambition, or even a project. Like it can be quite small, and you need to build in different camps. You need to understand how to get there, that it doesn't take one leap. And then you need to build even smaller camps to achieve that. You have to build in the practices and habits that will help you achieve those goals. So if your goal is to buy a house, the ground level is to start saving, obviously. Like I feel like using the house example with you guys is kind of redundant, given you're all accountants and you'll understand the finances in a much more intelligent and structured way than I will. But you have to start building it up from the ground. And whether that is building up practices into your daily life, cutting back, say, saving on a Spotify account and putting it into your Revolut each day, or doing different things to really structure that. And then rewarding yourself when you achieve that goal. I remember I was speaking to someone once who, the first time I met them at 6 months, they were so excited. They told me they had reached, 5,000 followers on Instagram. They would never be as happy as that. And the next time I met them 6 months later, they were so unhappy that they had reached 7,000, because for them, they had now upped their goal, but they hadn't actually put the structure in place to celebrate all the little wins along the way. Because we do need that pat on the back as individuals. We do need that celebration. Even if we say that we're not those kind of people, and a lot of people may not want the reward, it's still important to pause and realize that we've conquered another level on this mountain. We've done it. We're getting that bit closer. We're striking it off the list. We're accomplishing that little bit more step. Because the truth is, motivation only lasts so long. So having that pump, that desire, can be so beneficial. And it's also so important when we're feeling stressed, because feeling overwhelmed with this huge project in front of us, breaking it up into little pieces or smaller pieces, tangible pieces that we can manage, and then celebrating when we achieve something, it adds to endorphins. It helps us feel in control. It helps us feel on target. So it's really important that you do this. It's also really beneficial to write it out. There's a lot of research that says if you write something out, you'll achieve it. There was a really misleading study from Harvard Business School in the 80s, but there's now a lot more evidence to prove that writing it out can be really beneficial. So finally, we're into the closing section. So we have another 10 minutes. So people keep asking questions before we get to the Q&A. But finally, we're going to talk about sleep. So sleep is kind of the topic that we do a lot of corporate talks, but it's the one that we've been requested to talk about the most, because during lockdown, statistically speaking, 70% of the population has started having trouble sleeping. So that brings me to the question. Oh no. Okay, well, the polls come up funny again. I believe it's something, how have people been struggling with sleep, or if they've been struggling with any of the issues relating to insomnia, negative dream or bad dreams. Wow, okay, this is actually really interesting. Okay, so feeling unrested is taking the charge. it's really interesting the different groups that I've been speaking to. I gave a talk yesterday and nightmares was the clear winner, but it's interesting that unrested is the winner today. So feeling unrested is a really interesting subject to focus on because it shows that you're not achieving the maximum level of REM sleep or deep sleep. So it's really important that you do achieve this because sleep is the rebirth of our cells. It's the redevelopment of our cells. It's how we maintain our health and our well-being, our cognitive abilities. It's such an integral part of our identity. And yet it's something that we rarely think about. But feeling unrested is so important because if you start your day feeling tired and then you go about your day, of course you're going to finish your day feeling even more exhausted. And feeling exhausted can lead to stress. It can lead to low mood. Like, honestly, I never really appreciated sleep until I started learning all the important factors about it. Ooh, I don't know what happened here. Going back to goals randomly. So the thing about sleep is we are all individuals, and I can recommend something for someone and then another thing to someone else, and different things work for different people. That's been the clearest thing that I've learned over the last few months. These are 15 tips that have been consistently recommended as the best solutions for sleep. They typically rely on things like if you are an insomniac, there is evidence to say do not go to bed unless you are tired. Like, literally force yourself to walk out of a room, go sit down on a couch and read, and then come back and go to bed if you're feeling tired. And that's been proven to challenge insomnia and improve it. So that's one way you can do it. Having a cold room has been really, really evidenced because we sleep at a colder temperature. So it's better for us to sleep in a cold room. Everyone knows the rule about not using blue screens before bed or caffeine. Both are equally important. Alcohol, huge effects on our sleep. It makes it less structured and less quality sleep. So alcohol is unfortunately really frowned upon if you are struggling with sleep. And if not feeling rested is coming back as the top reported one here in this group today, then it means that we need to improve the quality. So trying each of these things for a week at a time can really improve, and keeping a diary and taking note, being very scientific and direct in our approach to sleep is the only way to challenge it. There is no magic pill. Like, well, there's sleeping pills, but obviously they're not necessarily the solution because it disrupts your natural ability to sleep. But taking this very scientific approach, going through each technique, trying to understand what works for you, what doesn't, is the best way to manage your sleep. And then becoming routine about it, becoming very enforcing of it. Like, I have to be so critical about my sleep hygiene every single night because I know if I disrupt it, my productivity plummets, my mood plummets, my ability to exercise plummets, my engagement with people, my willingness to find the joy in life all plummets. And at the end of the day, why would you put yourself through that for an extra 10 minutes on your phone when you can feel better? And that's what sleep does for us. But I understand that feeling unrested is hard. So there are other ways to challenge that feeling unrested, or it's typically seen as a lack of energy. And that's exercise. Exercise is incredible for building up your energy reserves and boosting that feeling. There's also hydration. My favorite conversation about hydration is the fact that water is often linked to low mood and sleep, or restlessness or tiredness 100% of the time. Like, it is the root cause of low mood. Like low mood on a slump kind of moments. So like Monday blues typically are related to dehydration after the weekend. Or there's a famous example of Rory McIlroy, the golfer, doing terrible in the American Open, I believe. I think it was about 10 years, or no, not 10, 6 years ago or something, 5 or 6 years ago. And he did terrible for the first 2 days. And then they realized he was dehydrated, and he went on not to win the competition, but to do very well. And that's because he drank water. So ensuring that hydration intake is up is so important. Our diets can really impact our energy levels. And there's a variety of different things that you can do to monitor this, but monitoring it and understanding it remains the most important. I did the presentation with the intention of talking about nightmares because that really has been the most consistent thing that we've been talking to people about. So I'm really fascinated that this group really didn't have nightmares as a key issue. But yes, managing stress is actually identified as causing my nightmares. So it's good that you guys aren't feeling nightmares. So we have just a few minutes left, so I'm just going to quickly jump into an overview. So stress, as I mentioned, is so important to benefit our lives, to advance our careers, to help us excel. But too much of it can obviously be incredibly negative. It can be very dangerous to our long-term well-being in terms of burnout, in terms of our impact on our relationships with others, to our physical health. If we're stressed and not sleeping, that can really be damaging to our physical health. It's also really important that we start to dig deeper and try to understand stress, because stress, if we just let it burn and never really learn to take control of it, can take over our lives. So the techniques that I advised you to look about are rationalizing it. So really taking apart your stress, digging deeper, questioning the realities of what happened in a specific event or conversation, and to really tear it apart and understand it. The next one was to ask, what if this happens or doesn't happen? What is the future plan? Regret is something that triggers stress for a lot of people. And if you do struggle with regret, the book, The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, it's a fictional book, but it's really interesting delving into the conversation about regret, because we often have this perfect image of what life looks like in an alter world if we don't do things. But really, living with regret is really living with desires, and it's questioning how to achieve those desires. And that brings me to Write It Out, where achieving these desires can be really important to goal setting and to our identity. So using goal setting to achieve our dreams can be really beneficial, but it's also very important for structuring the chaos in our mind, writing out that list, trying to understand how to set a routine to take care of our well-being. In terms of writing it out, journaling is also incredibly important. It's really good for reflection, even if you just have a little notebook on your desk and write out your thoughts throughout the day, or even just taking a practiced approach every morning or every evening. It's as simple as 5 minutes of your day, and it can make such a difference. And finally, good sleep. There is no easy way around it. You just got to be tough on yourself and figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and being strict on yourself and understanding how to optimize it. So we now have time for questions. I see a few have come in. So I believe, Dee, you're going to be joining me now for a little conversation.
Hi, Amy. I'm so sorry that we left you stranded there. My Zoom locked me out, so I'm on my phone at the moment. So my stress levels were rising, but they've come down now considerably after hearing all your great advice. So thanks so much. So look, we are actually inundated with questions. So I want to just kick off the first one. I'm not going to name anybody because we'll just keep this private in case people don't want their names mentioned. So the very first one we have is, can improving our emotional intelligence help with stress management and mental health?
Absolutely. So EQ is such an interesting area for me, because it really is so true that engaging in that emotional intelligence, and more importantly, self-awareness, is so important to managing stress and mental health. Because it's only by being aware of our emotions and our interpretation of things and our reactions to things that we can manage it in the future and conquer it in the future. It's something that therapy really engages with, this managing of emotions, this managing of self-awareness, that really comes up a lot. The people who do engage in therapy, or talking about it to loved ones, talking about it to friends, which I know is one of the most common solutions that people in those cohorts use as a technique for managing their well-being, that can be really important to understanding how we process things, how we feel and understand things and experience things in life. So definitely improving EQ and emotional intelligence is such a great way to manage stress. And it's also a really good way to be a better person, because if you understand yourself and understand why you're reacting to different things, you might not be so quick to snap or feel just unfriendly with someone. Just, you know, when you feel cold and you just want to be left alone. If you understand your emotional intelligence and understand why you're feeling like that, you can combat it and then improve your reactions to people, to be a better person, to be a better friend, and all that.
That's so true. The whole kind of empathy thing kicks in if you're able to kind of relate to other people. Brilliant. So the next question we have is, when I do my physical exercise, I don't get the mental buzz you hear about. Is that unusual? Even though I know it's good for me, sometimes I don't mentally feel like exercise, and motivation comes hard. Have you any suggestions around that?
Absolutely. I'm the exact same. I thought there was something wrong with me for so long, because when I'd put on my running shoes, I would literally hate it. I would hate the run. I would hate the feeling of like sweating and my lungs hurting and my legs hurting. And then I'd come home and have a shower, and I'd still not get that kick that everyone seems to talk about. And obviously, if you're concerned about it, do see a doctor. Don't ever challenge seeing a doctor, because if it's something you're concerned about, they will have the answers. But it is normal. It is okay. What I do say about motivation is kind of nonsense, because it only gets you so far. Really, it's drive and dedication that continues. I remember once hearing a story about an Olympic trainer, and their question was, who are the best athletes? You hear of Michael Phelps having the perfect body. For swimming, you hear of Simone Biles being incredibly powerful, and her body is biologically more powerful. And the trainer says that the people who are the most successful Olympic athletes are the ones who will never get bored doing the same thing over and over again. So it's completely true. It's hard to maintain motivation. It's hard to maintain motivation when you're doing runs every day, or weights every day, or swimming every day, or doing team sports every day. And it can be really hard to be motivated. That being said, there are techniques you can do to stay motivated. So that's, striking things off a diary, and seeing the physical changes in your appearance, setting yourself goals for changes in your appearance or your ability to pull like a certain amount of weight. The other way to do it is to put your gym clothes on. Once you have your gym clothes on, you kind of feel obligated to go. That's a really easy one. Making it easy to exercise, like not going to a gym too far away, or in current situation, running, setting yourself a time limit of say 30 minutes. That's all you have to do. So there's loads of little mental tricks, because that's really what it is. Because as I said, motivation only gets you so far. So what are all the mental tricks you can play on yourself to force yourself to go out? And then obviously setting goals, whether that's distance, whether that's physical appearance or strength goals, that's really the best way. But yeah, it's really tough. I feel for you incredibly. I
think we can all relate to that one.
100%.
So the next question, we're keeping them coming at you. Sorry, Aimée. I feel like I'm a super effective, efficient around big deadlines, where I get on well with stress. So, anxiety, lack of sleep, mood swings, and overeating. However, I'm finding it difficult to manage workload and deadlines without the stress responses. Is this something that you have seen, experience, and how to navigate this?
Absolutely.
Common one.
Yeah. So a lot of people thrive in deadlines. Like it's true. Like, when we went to college and we submitted, like, this is terrible, the assignment like minutes before the deadline, having only started at 12 hours before. Obviously it's different in professional life because it's a lot bigger of a project, but it is very normal to thrive in a deadline. However, you're right. We do get unwell from the stress, the anxiety, the lack of sleep. It can lead, so many people get flus after a deadline because they're all that tension up in their body, the unhealthy habits. And suddenly when they let go, they get sick. Overeating, weight gain during a deadline is so common. So it is really hard to manage it and to structure yourself, but it's about building the habit of maintaining small and consistent workloads. It's really about building that habit, setting yourself daily deadlines or tasks at the start of each day to build up towards that project. So building up a map, like I did with the Elon Musk Mount Everest thing, where you break up the project into targets. I'm sure you are already doing that, but breaking it down into smaller targets and holding yourself accountable, whether that's with your manager or with the targets you set yourself, and really building it up small, like in small steps, and making these tiny steps the deadline. So put pressure on yourself and reward yourself. That is the most important thing when you're building up this strategy for a long-term deadline and trying to combat the final push. But I do understand that you guys are all in incredibly stressful jobs, and a lot of the time the deadlines, like particularly around like tax season or end of year or closing of accounts, like I know it is very hard to structure that. So it's really about staying in tune with your body, listening to your body and your needs, and understanding what's going on and staying in control of that, and taking it day by day. It is so important that you're kind to yourself, that you're empathetic with yourself, and that you understand that maybe this is just for a short time, and I'll try maintain my well-being after. But yeah, it's a really hard thing, and it's quite a personal thing.
Great, absolutely, spot on. So the next question, Aimée, is I started bullet journaling and have found that it has really improved my structure and routine. Do you think bullet journaling can be effective for people who are not used to it or have never journaled?
Absolutely. So my app, the one we built, is basically a digital bullet journal, because bullet journaling is basically a space, if people are unaware of what bullet journaling is, it's a space for people to be creative, basically, and to do all the things that we've mentioned today: journaling, goal setting, practicing gratitude, setting structure to your month, having goals for your month. And it's really just a creative space. It's basically a notebook with dots instead of lines, and it enables you to really create something. And, you know, creativity is also a mental health mechanism for de-stress. So you're absolutely right. Bullet journaling can be incredibly effective because it's applying all these tools that we're mentioning, whether it's journaling or goal setting or all these different things, to start. But if people are not used to journaling and want to start, the best way to do it is to set yourself a page limit. So 3 pages or 4 pages, and just write for 4 pages. It can be utter nonsense. It can be a memory. It can be a goal or a dream or a desire. And just starting that practice every day is the best way to get into journaling.
Great advice. So the next question, I've gotten into a routine of going to bed and also getting up late compared to normal times. Is there anything wrong with that if I still get my sleep?
Absolutely not. It's really interesting. Obviously, it is better to have a sleeping pattern that aligns with daytime so that you can get sunlight. That is the most important thing, because vitamin D is incredibly important for the creation of our happiness hormones. But it's also really important that you understand that sleep is sleep, no matter which way you look at it. There's evidence to say that mental health in young people has actually gone up because they're getting more sleep than ever because of lockdown. And, you know, at the start of the pandemic, everyone was so worried that children's mental health would plummet. And there is evidence that it has decreased. Depression is on the rise, anxiety is on the rise, but their overall well-being is increasing because they're sleeping more. So it doesn't really matter how you, what time you go to bed, so long as you're actually achieving those hours of REM and maintaining a positive health cycle, a sleep cycle.
Great. Next question, Aimée. A friend of mine is really struggling with lockdown since Christmas, very down and lack of interest, seems to be depressed, no interest in exercising or doing things he always loved. What can I do to help? That's a great question. Yeah,
so it's one of the most common ones I get asked on these presentations, and it's always the one that makes me the most upset, because it's so hard to be in that situation, to be a friend who sees someone else they love in pain and not knowing how to help or not being able to help, because a lot of the time it's like dragging a horse to water. You can't force them to drink. They have to do it for themselves. But the fact that you've identified it is amazing. The first suggestion I always say is talk about it. Ask them outright how they're doing. Ask them and try and encourage them to open up, whether that's you talking about your own problems and then allowing them the space, and then asking open-ended questions. So a lot of us are taught to speak and not really listen. So if you ask questions that focus on like who or what or where or when, but not why, because why is yes or no, typically it's a much better way to engage with people, because you can really get them to open up. Don't ask yes or no questions, just get them to open up and discuss their feelings. The next thing about not being engaged in interests. So 49% of Irish people are less interested in engaging in hobbies that they did before lockdown, and 57% of us are less likely to want to see people than we did before lockdown. Lockdown has changed how we interact and socialize and engage with our old hobbies. So it is normal for people to be less interested in engaging. But if it is coming with that concern around depression, start slowly. Do little wins. And actually the biggest concern isn't necessarily the first outing, but the second one. Typically people are willing to do the first outing, but then are more reluctant to do it a second time, which is kind of an interesting question around social anxiety. But really, it's just about trying to get them to open up, to see that there is a problem. It's a self-awareness piece, that if they can see that there is a problem, that there is concern, they might be more likely to act on it. But yeah, it's a really tough situation, and I hope you're taking care of yourself, because when your loved ones are not well, it can often put stress on the individual. So do take care of yourself as well.
Yeah, great. And I think great advice there about just, the fact that this is a common problem, that people are finding the sort of transition out of lockdown, very difficult. And there are some real challenges there. So I think that's a great thing to call out. Running along with the next question, Aimée, sorry. So this person has said, thank you, Aimée. I know a lot of this already, but I'm so busy and juggling that I don't put it into practice. Or when I do, it takes very little to dislodge the routine. So any tips on how to be consistent and insistent with the sort of the change or the new habits?
Yeah, absolutely. So it can be so hard. Even I find it so hard to maintain this engagement with mental health, because it's different to physical health, where some people do get that endorphin rush after a run or after exercise. You don't get the same feeling after engaging with our mental health. But it's like our physical health, where it does take everyday practices and consistent engagement for us to feel the effects of self-awareness and increased well-being. So it's a really tough one to encourage, and it's really about setting a routine. So building it into your habit structure. So whether that's having the notebook on your desk and writing out your thoughts during the day, or setting a set time for you to practice your well-being each day. So waking up 10 minutes earlier to really focus on journaling, or to practice gratitude, or to meditate. Also doing it in the evening, like really just putting that point of time in the day. Again, there is evidence to say that if you write that you're going to achieve a habit, if you write that out and say, I, Aimée Louise Carton, focus that I will commit to meditating every day for the next 25 days, there's evidence to say you're more likely to achieve that goal if you write it out. Also encouraging people to keep track with you, to do it with you. Having people to maintain accountability with you is a really good way to engage in things and to maintain a routine. So it's trying different things. I know this isn't like the single answer that people want. Everyone wants a single solution that'll work for them, but it's trying different things, really figuring out how to build up habits into your own life. Reading Atomic Habits, I read it like 3 years ago, or a year ago for the first time, and I still read it like once every few months, because it's so powerful, and it's a great way to understand our psychological behaviors around routines.
Brilliant. Aimée, we have time for just one more question. I think it's a really good one. Are there any indicators that a line has been crossed towards burnout, where stress, self-help may not be enough anymore and professional help should be sought? So I think it's an important question.
So important. And it's a really personal one, because our emotional ability to manage stress is very different person to person. But if you are concerned and you've already started thinking about getting professional help, it's time to get professional help. There is no too bad scenario. If you are feeling overwhelmed, getting help. I actually think everyone should get professional help and see a therapist at some point, because it's like washing your brain out. You get to bitch about, sorry, I shouldn't say bitch, but you get to complain and rant and have just a quiet space to yourself where you get to vent. And having that professional opinion on burnout, particularly burnout, because it is so detrimental and the impact of it can last so long. Being proactive and preventing that is so important in today's society, maintaining that real firm control on yourself. Because it would be like if you started being concerned about a lump or something happening like dizzy spells, you would see a doctor pretty much as soon as you can to prevent it. So with burnout, if you know you're going to be going through a stressful time, planning ahead for it is so important.
Brilliant. Aimée, thank you so much. And just to say on that note, if someone is actually feeling that sort of, line has been crossed, we do talk about mental health being on a spectrum. And if they feel they're kind of teetering over to the, the kind of more extreme side, or even in fact, if they're kind of hovering in the middle, or they just are aware of themselves feeling overwhelmed, that, CA support is there for them. And, there is free eight sessions of counselling with a professional counsellor available to everyone, members and students of the Institute. So I'd really just like to kind of plug that and make sure anyone listening today is going, oh, well, I can't afford that, or that's not for me, or that's too much trouble. So that's available for everybody. So look, Aimée, we're at the top of the session. I can't believe that I missed the beginning and wasn't able to give you a wonderful warm welcome and list out all your amazing achievements. But I mean, I know people, I'm sure, will know you from being the winner of an Actis back in 2019, and honestly, where you've been, and you're now sort of in the top 30 young entrepreneurs under 30 in Ireland. I mean, really some amazing achievements. And I know your app KeepAppy is just keeping everyone happy. So I just think you're some woman for one woman, as the saying goes. So thank you so much for coming along today. It really has been amazing hearing so many practical pieces of advice. And I think that's what the real key takeaway for me is. All of these things we can put into practice, like literally today, and hold ourselves accountable, and hopefully have improved mental health as a result, and less stress and all that good stuff. So that's it. We're trying to round it off quickly. So Aimée, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks so much. Take care.
Bye guys.
Bye.